Part 1 Red Dust and the Mended Shawl. The washboard scraped against Clara Hale's raw knuckles as she worked the gray soap into another shirt. Steam rose from the copper tub, mixing with the dry desert air that swept through the open door of their small adobe dwelling. Outside, the town of Sage Creek baked under the August sun. Its main street nothing but packed earth and scattered planks where the more prosperous merchants had laid boardwalks. "Clara, my stomach hurts." 7-year-old Robbie whined from the corner where he sat mending a torn sock with clumsy fingers. "That's hunger talking," Clara said without looking up. "Supper will be beans and cornbread, same as yesterday." She didn't mention it would be their last bit of cornmeal until she could collect payment from the Harpers for their laundry. At 22, Clara's hands already bore the calluses of someone twice her age. The lye soap had long since eaten away any softness, leaving behind cracked skin that bled in the creases. She'd been 14 when their parents died of fever, leaving her with Mary. Then 10, and the boys Robbie and Dan, mere babies at 3 and 5. "I'll help with the washing," Mary offered, appearing in the doorway with Dan trailing behind her. At 18, Mary had their mother's delicate features, but Clara's determined jaw. "You've got the Hendersons' mending to finish," Clara reminded her. "Mrs. Henderson wants those tablecloths by Sunday for the church picnic." The church picnic, Clara's jaw tightened. Another social gathering where the good families of Sage Creek would parade their prosperity while she and her siblings watched from the edges, tolerated but never welcomed. She wrung out the last shirt and stood, pressing a hand to her aching back. The desert heat made everything harder: the washing, the cooking, the endless battle against dust that crept through every crack in their walls. "I'm going to fetch our pay from Mrs. Palmer," Clara announced, untying her apron. "Mary, watch the boys." The walk to the general store took her down Main Street, past the Lucky Dollar Saloon where piano music spilled out despite the early hour, past the bank with its false front that made it appear grander than its single story warranted. Men tipped their hats perfunctorily. Women clutched their skirts aside as if poverty might be contagious. Mrs. Palmer's store smelled of coffee beans and leather, a rich scent that made Clara's empty stomach clench. She waited while Mrs. Palmer served Celia Hart, the mayor's daughter. Celia's yellow taffeta dress rustled as she pointed to various items on the high shelves: imported chocolates, fine ribbons, a tortoiseshell comb. "And I'll need extra provisions for Sunday's picnic," Celia was saying. "Father's invited the territorial administrator. Everything must be perfect." Clara studied the floorboards, counting the knots in the wood. 1, 2, 3. The door opened, bringing a gust of heat and the scent of horse and leather. Clara glanced up to see a man she'd noticed around town but never spoken to. Toma Nesmith, owner of the Three Rivers Ranch, part Apache, the gossips said, though he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who'd long stopped caring what others whispered. He moved through the store with economical grace, his boots barely making a sound on the wooden floor, when he reached for a sack of flour on a high shelf. Clara noticed his hands scarred but clean, with the kind of strength that came from working with horses and cattle rather than wielding power over others. Their eyes met briefly. His were dark, steady, seeing without judging. Clara looked away first, heat creeping up her neck that had nothing to do with the desert sun. A crash interrupted the moment. Clara had been backing away from the counter and knocked into a display of canned goods. Tins rolled across the floor with a terrible clatter. "Oh!" Clara dropped to her knees, scrambling to collect the scattered cans. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Palmer, I'll—" "Clumsy girl, Mrs." Palmer's voice cut sharp. "Always causing trouble, as if having you people in my store isn't burden enough." Clara's cheeks burned. She reached for a can that had rolled toward the door, but a brown hand got there first. Toma Nesmith crouched beside her, gathering cans with quiet efficiency. "The display was too close to the walkway," he said, his voice low and measured. "Easy accident." He helped her to her feet, studying her for a moment. "Steady people don't fall easy," he said quietly, meant only for her ears. "And you strike me as steady." Before Clara could respond, he turned to Mrs. Palmer. "I'll take these dented cans off your hands. Half price seems fair for damaged goods." "Mrs. Palmer sputtered, but couldn't argue with a paying customer, especially one who owned one of the larger ranches in the territory. Celia Hart watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. Her pretty mouth pursed in disapproval. Clara collected her meager payment, $2 for a week's washing, and fled the store. But she felt Toma Nesmith's gaze follow her, thoughtful and measuring, seeing something more than a poor girl in a patched dress. Sunday arrived with cloudless skies and a hot wind that promised dust devils by afternoon. Clara dressed her siblings in their best clothes, which meant their least mended, and herded them toward the church grounds where tables groaned under the weight of covered dishes and preserves. The Hale family had brought a small pot of beans flavored with a precious bit of salt pork, and Clara's carefully hoarded sugar had gone into a simple cake. They found a spot at the edge of the gathering, where the shade was thinnest, but the chance of confrontation smallest. "Don't wander," Clara warned the boys, "and don't touch anything that isn't ours." But hunger and the sight of plenty proved too much for young Dan. Clara turned from spreading their thin blanket to find him reaching for a piece of fried chicken from the mayor's table. "Get your dirty hands away!" Celia Hart's shriek split the air. She grabbed Dan's wrist, her nails digging in. "Thieving little rat!" "He's just hungry," Clara said, pulling Dan behind her. "He didn't mean..." Celia's voice rose higher. "Like you didn't mean to throw yourself at Mr. Nesmith in Mother's store. We all saw you, playing at being clumsy to get his attention." The crowd drew closer, eager for spectacle. Clara felt their eyes like brands on her skin. "Some people," Celia continued, warming to her audience, "don't know their place. They think batting their eyes at wealthy ranchers will lift them from the gutter." She grabbed Clara's shawl, the one piece of their mother's clothing Clara had kept, mended with different colored threads until it looked like a patchwork quilt. "Look at this rag, pretending to be decent folk when everyone knows what you are. Poor trash playing at..." She yanked the shawl from Clara's shoulders and flung it to the ground, grinding it into the dust with her heel. The silence that followed was complete. Clara stood frozen, arms wrapped around herself as if she could hold in the humiliation. Mary had gone white, the boys pressed against her skirts. In that moment, Clara felt every patch on her dress, every careful darn, every sign of poverty laid bare before the town's judgment. Then leather boots appeared in her vision. Toma Nesmith bent and retrieved the shawl, shaking the dust from it with careful hands. The crowd parted before him like water before a stone. He examined the shawl with the same attention he might give a horse's injury or a delicate piece of tack. His fingers traced the mended places. "Fine work," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "Each stitch placed with thought. My grandmother would say this shows more skill than any store-bought finery." He looked directly at Celia. "She'd say it shows the kind of strength that builds homes and holds families together. The kind of strength that doesn't need to tear others down to stand tall." He turned to Clara, holding out the shawl. When she didn't move, frozen by shock and something else, a warmth that had nothing to do with shame, he stepped closer. "May I?" he asked quietly. At her nod, he draped the shawl around her shoulders, his hands gentle but sure. For a moment, they stood like that, his hands on the edges of the shawl, his eyes holding hers. "The woman who made these stitches," he said, still in that carrying voice, "has nothing to be ashamed of. Neither does the woman who wears it." The spell broke as Reverend Abel cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should all remember that we're here in Christian fellowship," he suggested weakly. Toma stepped back, but not before Clara caught something in his expression, a flash of recognition, as if he saw in her something he'd been looking for without knowing it. The crowd dispersed slowly, robbed of their entertainment. Celia flounced away, her father trailing apologies that fooled no one. A few women nodded at Clara's small gestures, but more than she usually received. Clara, Mrs. Chen, the doctor's wife, touched her arm. I have some sewing that needs doing. Good pay for good work. Stop by Tuesday. Others followed suit, suddenly remembering mending or washing they needed done. Clara accepted with quiet dignity, though her hands shook as she gathered her family to leave. As they walked home, Mary whispered, "That man, Mr. Nesmith, why did he do that?" Clara touched the shawl, still warm from his hands. "I don't know." But that night, as she tucked the boys into their narrow beds, she remembered his words, "Steady people don't fall easy." And for the first time in years, she wondered if someone might see her as more than the sum of their poverty. The next morning brought unexpected news. Josiah, the old foreman from Three Rivers Ranch, appeared at their door just after dawn. Mr. Nesmith sent me," he said, hat in hand. "He's looking for someone to manage the house and help with the young ones out at the ranch. His brother passed last winter, left 3 children, pays good room and board included for you and yours, if you're interested." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why me?" Josiah's weathered face cracked into a smile. "Boss said he needs someone who knows how to make something from nothing. Said he saw how you handle young ones, how you carry yourself. Respectable woman, he said, steady." That word again. Clara looked back at their cramped home, at Mary's hopeful face, at the boys peering around her skirts. "When?" she asked. "Whenever you're ready. Boss ain't one to rush important things." After Josiah left, Clara sat on their single chair, staring at her work-worn hands. The town had made its judgment of her clear, but out there, at Three Rivers Ranch, perhaps she could write a different story. "We're going, aren't we?" Mary asked softly. Clara thought of Toma Nesmith's dark eyes, of the careful way he'd handled her mother's shawl, of a world beyond the narrow streets of Sage Creek. "Yes," she said. "We're going." Part 2. An invitation under the mesquite. 3 days had passed since the church picnic. 3 days of Clara going about her work with Toma Nesmith's words echoing in her mind. She was hanging the wash behind their adobe house when a shadow fell across the white sheets. Miss Hale. She turned to find him standing at the edge of their small yard, hat in hand, in the harsh morning light. She could see silver threading through his black hair, placing him somewhere in his early 30s. His clothes were clean but practical, the dress of a working rancher, not a gentleman who hired others to dirty their hands. Mr. Nesmith." She wiped her damp hands on her apron, acutely aware of how she must look, sleeves rolled up, hair escaping from its pins, the eternal scent of lye soap clinging to her clothes. "I apologize for coming to your home uninvited," he said, "but I wanted to speak with you directly about my offer." "Josiah delivered your message." Clara kept her voice neutral, though her pulse quickened. "It was unexpected." A slight smile touched his lips. "I prefer to handle my own business when it matters. May we speak?" Clara glanced toward the house where Mary was teaching the boys their letters. "Would you like to come inside? I can offer coffee, though it's weak." "Here is fine." He gestured to the wooden bench Dan had cobbled together from salvaged lumber. "I spend too much time indoors as it is." They sat with a proper distance between them. Clara's hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Up close, she noticed the deep lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting into the sun and bearing responsibilities too young. "My brother William died last December," he began without preamble. "Lung fever. His wife passed 2 years before, birthing their youngest. Left me 3 children, Sarah's 9, James is 7, little Beth just 4. "I'm sorry for your losses," Clara said softly. He nodded, accepting the sympathy without dwelling on it. "I've had a succession of housekeepers. Mrs. Pritchard lasted longest 2 months. Said the house was too far from town, the children too wild, the work too hard. His mouth twisted wryly. What she meant was that working for a half-breed on a ranch full of Apache cowboys didn't suit her notion of respectability. Clara straightened. That's not... It's the truth. He met her eyes directly. Half my cowboys are Apache, including my foreman, my mother's people. The other half are Mexican, Negro, Irish men judged by their work, not their blood. If that troubles you, best to know now. Mr. Nesmith, Clara said carefully. I've been judged by circumstances beyond my control my whole life. I'm hardly in a position to cast stones at others. Something shifted in his expression, a warmth that transformed the austere lines of his face. That's what I hope to hear. He leaned forward slightly. I need someone to run the house. Yes, but more than that, I need someone who'll see those children as children, not burdens or obligations. Someone who understands that family isn't always about blood. Why me? The question escaped before Clara could stop it. You don't know anything about me except that I'm poor and... She gestured helplessly. Steady, as you put it. I know enough. His voice dropped lower. I know you've raised 3 children alone since you were barely more than a child yourself. I know you face down the scorn of this town every day and don't let it break you. I know you work yourself raw to keep your family together and proud. Heat crept up Clara's neck. You've been asking about me. I have. No apology in his tone. A man doesn't invite strangers into his home without knowing their character. Everyone I asked, the ones worth listening to, spoke of your honesty, your work, your devotion to those children. He paused. And I saw for myself how you stood at that picnic. Dignity can't be bought or borrowed. Miss Hale, you either have it or you don't. Clara forced herself to meet his gaze. And if I accept, what exactly are you offering? Fair wages, $30 a month, plus room and board for all of you. You'd have your own quarters, separate from the main house, a bedroom for you and your sister, another for the boys, kitchen privileges, of course, and the children would work alongside mine with the tutor I'm bringing in come fall. Tutor? Clara couldn't hide her surprise. Education was a luxury far beyond their reach. My brother wanted his children educated properly. I intend to honor that. Your siblings would be included, can't have some children learning while others watch. It was more than generous. Too generous. Clara's spine stiffened. Mr. Nesmith, if this offer comes from pity or some misguided attempt to make up for Sunday's humiliation... Stop! The word came out sharp, and he immediately softened his tone. I don't deal in pity. Miss Hale, I need a housekeeper. You need work that pays fair wages. That's business. He stood, settling his hat back on his head. But I won't lie and say Sunday didn't clarify my thinking. Any woman who could stand with such grace while being publicly shamed, who could hold her family together in that moment, that's the kind of strength my household needs. Clara rose as well, her mind racing. I need to discuss it with Mary, and I'll need certain assurances. I name them. If I come to work for you, it's as your employee, nothing more. I won't be beholden or obligated in any way beyond my duties. His eyes flashed with something that might have been anger. Miss Hale, I'm offering you a job. Not... He stopped, visibly controlling himself. You'll be my employee. Nothing more, nothing less. My word on it. Then I accept, Clara heard herself say. When do you need us? Whenever suits you. Tomorrow. Next week, I know uprooting a household takes time. Day after tomorrow. Clara decided, after I settle accounts here. He touched the brim of his hat. I'll send Josiah with the wagon at dawn. No need to bring furniture, the quarters are furnished. As he turned to go, Clara called after him. Mr. Nesmith, that day in the store, when you helped with the cans. Why? He paused, looking back over his shoulder. Saw a woman doing her best in a world that made it harder than it needed to be. Reminded me of my mother. A ghost of a smile. She had the same way of holding her head up no matter what. same way of making stubborn look like dignity. After he left, Clara sank onto the bench, legs suddenly weak. Mary appeared in the doorway, eyes bright with curiosity. "Well," her sister demanded, "what did he want?" "To offer us a new life," Clara said faintly, and I accepted. The next day passed in a whirlwind. Clara paid off their debts, the last of the rent, the credit at Palmer's store. Word spread quickly, as it always did in Sage Creek. Some women who'd never acknowledged her existence suddenly remembered mending they needed done. "When you get settled, dear," others whispered behind their hands, speculation running from the charitable to the scandalous. Clara ignored them all, focusing on packing their meager possessions. Everything they owned fit into 2 trunks and a handful of boxes. Mary folded their mother's quilts with reverent hands while the boys raced around in excitement. Dan peppering her with questions about horses and James teaching Robbie Spanish words he'd learned from the Mexican children. "Will we each have our own bed?" Robbie asked for the 10th time. "So Mr. Nesmith said." Clara tucked their father's Bible carefully between layers of clothing. "But we'll work for that comfort. Understand, we're not charity cases." "I can work," Dan piped up. "I'm strong. I can lift the water buckets all by myself now." Clara ruffled his hair, heart aching with love for his earnest little face. "I know you can." That evening, as she served their last meal in the adobe house, beans and cornbread, same as always, a knock came at the door. Clara opened it to find Mrs. Chen with a wrapped bundle. "For your journey," the doctor's wife said, pressing it into Clara's hands. Inside was a length of sturdy blue calico and a smaller bundle of penny candy for the children. "And Clara, you're doing the right thing. That ranch, it's a good place, different from town, but good." Similar gifts appeared throughout the evening, a jar of preserves from the blacksmith's wife, hair ribbons from the Mexican laundress, a small wooden horse Dan had admired from the old German carpenter. Not everyone in Sage Creek had judged her harshly. Clara realized she'd simply been too proud or too hurt to see the quiet kindnesses. Dawn came cool and clear, unusual for late summer. True to his word, Josiah arrived with a sturdy wagon, bringing along a younger man he introduced as Miguel. "To help with the loading, señorita," Miguel said, touching his hat brim. "Mr. Toma. He say to make sure you have easy journey." It took less than an hour to load their possessions. Clara took one last look at the house that had sheltered them these past 8 years, its cracked walls, sagging roof, the patch of garden she'd coaxed from the desert soil. Then she climbed onto the wagon seat beside Josiah. Mary and the boys arranged in the back among their belongings. The journey to 3 Rivers Ranch took them through country Clara had only glimpsed from town. The road wound between red rock mesas and through stands of cottonwood that promised water nearby. Josiah proved a font of information, pointing out landmarks and sharing ranch history in his gravelly voice. 3 Rivers gets its name honest, he explained. Got the Rio Verde on the east, Willow Creek through the middle pastures, and Silver Creek marking the western boundary. Water's what makes it valuable, especially in dry years. "How long have you worked for Mr. Nesmith?" Clara asked. "Since before he was Mr. anything. Knew his daddy. Worked for him when Toma was just a sprout. Watched him take over at 19 when the old man died. That was, Lord, 15 years back now." 19's young for such responsibility. Josiah snorted. "Boy was born responsible. His daddy saw to that. Old Tom Nesmith was hard as flint. Especially after Toma's mama died, Apache woman," he added with a sideways glance. "Beautiful as morning, gentle as rain. When she passed, old Tom got harder, like he blamed the world. But Toma, he got stronger instead, quiet strong, like her." The sun climbed higher as they traveled, the landscape opening into vast grasslands dotted with cattle. Clara had expected barren range, but this was rich country. The grass belly-high on a horse in places. "There," Josiah pointed ahead. 3 rivers. The ranch buildings sprawled in a natural bowl between low hills, sheltered from the worst winds but open to catch every breeze. The main house was adobe like many territorial homes, but larger, with a wide portal running the entire front length. Beyond it stood barns, corrals, bunkhouses, and various outbuildings, all arranged with thought to function and defense, a reminder that Apache raids, though less common now, weren't distant memory. "It's bigger than I expected," Mary breathed. "One of the largest spreads in the territory," Josiah said with pride. "Mister, Toma runs near 3,000 head, plus horses. Takes a lot of men to work it proper." As they rolled into the yard, Clara saw those men, a mix of faces and ages, all pausing in their work to observe the newcomers. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin. First impressions mattered. Toma emerged from the main house, and Clara felt that strange flutter in her chest again. He wore work clothes, leather chaps over canvas pants, a plain cotton shirt with sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. This was his element. She realized. In town, he'd seemed constrained. Here, he moved with the easy authority of a man on his own land. "Miss Hale, Miss Mary." He helped them down from the wagon while Miguel and several other men began unloading. "Welcome to 3 Rivers. I hope the journey wasn't too taxing." "It was lovely," Clara said, meaning it. "Your land is beautiful." A pleased look crossed his face. "Wait until you see it in spring. The wildflowers." He caught himself. "But come, let me show you to your quarters. The children are in the schoolroom with their lessons, but they're eager to meet you." He led them around the main house to a smaller adobe structure connected by a covered walkway. "This was the original homestead," he explained, opening the heavy wooden door. "My father built the big house when he married, but kept this for guests and family." Inside was cool and surprisingly spacious. A main room served as parlor and dining space, with a fireplace and real glass windows, through doorways. Clara glimpsed 2 bedrooms and what looked like a small private kitchen. "It's furnished simple," Toma said, suddenly seeming unsure. "But if you need anything changed, it's perfect." Clara meant it. After their cramped adobe, this felt like a palace. More than generous. "The main kitchen is through the walkway. That's where you'll do most of the cooking for the family and yourselves. The hands have their own cook at the bunkhouse." He moved to the window, pointing out various buildings. "Smokehouse there. Springhouse for keeping things cool. Garden plot that needs attention. Mrs. Pritchard let it go to seed." "I can fix that," Dan piped up. "I helped Clara with our garden. I know about tomatoes and beans and squash." Toma smiled a real smile that transformed his serious face. "Good. A ranch needs gardens as much as it needs cattle." He turned back to Clara. "Take today to settle in. Tomorrow's soon enough to meet the children proper and sort out routines. Lupe, she's been managing the kitchen since Mrs. Pritchard left, will show you where everything's kept." "Mr. Nesmith," Clara began, but he held up a hand. "Tom, or Toma, if you prefer. We don't stand on ceremony here." "Then you must call me Clara." The informality felt daring. But he was right, frontier ranches had different rules than town society. He nodded, looking like he wanted to say more. Instead, he touched his hat brim. "I'll leave you to get settled. Supper's at 6, we eat early. With the light. The children are used to eating in the kitchen, but if you'd prefer the dining room." "The kitchen's fine," Clara said quickly. "Best way to learn their habits is to keep to them at first." Another pleased look. Practical. Good. He headed for the door, then paused. "Clara, I'm glad you're here, all of you." After he left, Mary spun in a circle, arms outstretched. "Look at this place. Real bedrooms, windows with glass." The boys had already claimed the smaller bedroom, bouncing on the rope-strung beds with glee. Clara let them celebrate for a moment before calling them to order. "Remember why we're here," she said firmly. "This isn't charity. We work for this." But as she unpacked their few possessions in the surprising luxury of a private bedroom, one she'd share with Mary, instead of all four of them crammed together, Clara allowed herself a moment of pure relief. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they had shelter, steady wages, and the promise of education for the children. Through the window, she could see Toma talking with his foreman near the corrals, his gestures decisive but calm. He glanced toward their quarters, and even from a distance, she felt the weight of his attention. "I see the woman you are," he'd said at the picnic. Clara touched her mother's shawl, carefully folded in the trunk. Perhaps here, she could finally discover who that woman might be. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A Mexican woman stood outside, round-faced and smiling, flour dusting her apron. "Señorita Clara, I am Lupe. Don Toma asked me to help you know the kitchen. Yes, and to meet the little ones they are like wild colts today, knowing you come." Clara smiled back, feeling the first threads of belonging weave around her. "I'd be grateful for your help. Lupe, shall we go meet these wild colts?" As she followed Lupe along the covered walkway, the boys racing ahead and Mary close beside her, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not the desperate kind that had kept her going through hardship, but something warmer, steadier, like the man who'd offered it. This new life asked only for honest work and an open heart. Clara could give both. Part 3: The Hands That Keep a House. Clara woke before dawn, as had become her habit in the 2 weeks since arriving at Three Rivers Ranch. Through the window, stars still pricked the purple sky, but the eastern horizon showed the faintest blush of light. She dressed quietly, not wanting to wake Mary, and made her way to the main kitchen. The massive adobe stove still held warmth from yesterday's banking. Clara fed it fresh wood, coaxing the flames back to life. By the time Lupe arrived, she had coffee brewing and biscuit dough rising under a clean cloth. "Ah, you beat me again," Lupe said with fond exasperation. "Don Toma, he will think I grow lazy." "Never," Clara assured her, kneading bread dough for the noon meal. But many hands make the work light. They had fallen into an easy rhythm. She and Lupe, the older woman, knew every detail of running the ranch kitchen, which cowboys had tender stomachs. How Toma liked his eggs, the way Sarah wouldn't eat beans unless they were mashed smooth. Clara brought her own skills stretching ingredients, mending what others would discard, organizing supplies with an efficiency born of years making do with less. "The little ones, they come soon," Lupe warned, and sure enough, the thunder of small feet announced the arrival of all 6 children. Sarah Nesmith led the pack, her father's dark eyes solemn in a face that promised beauty. Behind her came James, 7 and all knees and elbows. Then little Beth clutching her rag doll. Clara's siblings brought up the rear, Mary helping Robbie with his buttons, Dan already asking if he could help with the horses. "Wash hands first," Clara directed, pointing to the basin. "No breakfast for dirty fingers." Sarah helped Beth reach the water, the gesture automatic. These children had been caring for each other too. Clara realized death had made them old before their time, just like her own sibling. Aunt Clara. Beth lisped she'd taken to calling Clara that from the first day. "Will you braid my hair like you did Sarah's?" "After breakfast, sweet one." Clara set plates before them, noting with satisfaction how much heartier the portions were than what she'd managed in town. Eggs, bacon, biscuits with butter and honey, fresh milk still warm from the cow. "Dan, stop feeding bacon to the dog. He's fat enough." The yellow hound Toma called Buck had indeed grown rounder since Clara's arrival, shadowing the children and positioning himself strategically for dropped morsels. "Papa says Buck's a working dog." James protested. "He needs energy for chasing coyotes." Your papa also says working dogs shouldn't beg at table. Clara countered. Would you like to explain to him why Buck's forgotten his manners? James subsided, but she caught his grin. The boy had his uncle's stubborn streak, but also his sense of fairness. Win his respect, and you had his loyalty. After breakfast, the children scattered to their chores, Sarah and Mary to gather eggs, the boys to fill water buckets, Beth to help Lupe with simple kitchen tasks. Clara turned her attention to the ledgers Toma had entrusted to her. Just household accounts, he'd said, almost apologetically. Mrs. Pritchard couldn't be bothered, but I like knowing where money goes. Clara had taken one look at the jumbled receipts and incomplete records and understood why previous housekeepers had avoided the task. But numbers had never frightened her. When you counted every penny, you learned to make them behave. She was deep in calculations when hoofbeats announced Toma's return from the morning rounds. He entered the kitchen still dusty from the range, hat in hand. Coffee, Clara offered, already reaching for the pot. Bless you. He sank into a chair with a grateful sigh. Lost 2 head in Skeleton Canyon. Cat tracks. Looked like mountain cat. Clara set the cup before him. Strong and black as he preferred. Most likely, we'll move the herd closer for a few weeks. He studied her over the rim. You've been at those books all morning. Someone needs to... Did you know Mrs. Pritchard was ordering flour from Kansas City at twice the price of Murphy's Mill in town? No, he said slowly. I didn't. Well, you're not anymore. I've already sent Miguel with a new order. She hesitated, then forged ahead. I've made other changes too. The vegetable merchant was padding weights I've switched to the Delgado family. They're honest, and their produce is fresher. You've been investigating my suppliers. Not accusation, curiosity. I've been doing my job. Clara met his gaze steadily. You hired me to run this household efficiently. That includes knowing who we buy from and why. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. And have you investigated all aspects of ranch life so thoroughly? Heat crept up her neck. I may have asked questions. Josiah's been helpful, explaining how things work. Did you know your hands have been mending their own clothes badly? I might add, I've instituted a mending circle Tuesday evenings. Mary and I handle repairs in exchange for help with heavy work. A mending circle. He leaned back, amusement clear now. What do the men think of that? They think getting their shirts fixed proper is worth an evening's wood chopping. She couldn't help her own smile. Even your tough cowboys appreciate clothes that don't fall apart mid-ride. He laughed then, a rich sound that transformed his usually serious face. I imagine they do. His expression sobered. Clara, I hope you know you don't have to work so hard. I don't expect miracles. I don't perform miracles, she said quietly. I just do what needs doing. This ranch, these children, they need a steady hand. That's what you hired me for. No, he said, so low she almost missed it. I hired you because you see what needs doing without being told. There's a difference. Before Clara could respond, a commotion erupted from the yard. Dan burst through the door, eyes wide with excitement. Clara, come quick. The mare's foaling, and Jose says I can watch if you say yes, and James gets to go. So can I, please? Clara glanced at Toma, who nodded. If Jose says it's safe, but you mind him exactly. Understand? Dan whooped and raced back out. Clara started to follow, then paused. Would you... That is, are you going to watch? Wouldn't miss it. Star's first foal. He stood, settling his hat. Coming. They walked together toward the barns, a comfortable distance between them. The late morning sun beat down, but the cottonwoods provided patches of blessed shade. I've been meaning to thank you, Toma said suddenly, for what you've done with the children. Beth hasn't had nightmares once since you arrived. And Sarah actually smiled yesterday, really smiled, not just being polite. They're good children. They just needed... Clara searched for words. Routine, I suppose. Knowing what to expect. They needed someone who sees them as children, not obligations or reminders of grief. His voice roughened. I've tried, but you've done wonderfully. Clara interrupted. They adore you, but sometimes children need someone who isn't carrying the same loss, someone who can just be normal with them. They'd reached the barn where a small crowd had gathered. Jose, the head wrangler, nodded respectfully. Señorita Clara, the boys, they can stay if they are quiet. What followed was one of nature's everyday miracles, the mare. A pretty paint Jose called Estrella labored with the patient strength of her kind. Dan and James watched wide-eyed as the foal emerged, Jose's calm voice explaining each stage. There, see the feet good position. Now we wait. Let Mama do her work. Clara found herself holding her breath as the foal slipped free, wet and impossibly fragile. Jose quickly cleared its nostrils, and within moments the tiny creature was breathing, struggling to unfold legs that seemed too long for its body. It's a girl, Jose announced with satisfaction. A warrior, this one. See how she fights to stand? Dan's face glowed with wonder. She's beautiful. What will you name her? That's for Don Toma to say. Jose replied, perhaps the young señoritas have ideas. Sarah and Beth had arrived, Mary shepherding them carefully. Beth clapped her hands at the sight of the foal, now standing on shaky legs. Wobbles, she declared. Because she wobbles. The adults laughed, but Toma crouched beside his niece. That's a fine barn name, Little Bee, but she needs a proper name too, for when she's grown strong. What was your mama's name? Sarah asked unexpectedly. Your real mama. A hush fell over the group. Clara saw something flicker across Toma's face. Pain, memory, love. Ayana, he said softly. It means eternal blossom, in her language. That's pretty, Sarah decided. Can we call the baby horse Ayana? Toma's throat worked. I think she would have liked that. He rose abruptly and strode from the barn. Clara caught Jose's eye, saw his small nod of understanding. She ushered the children back toward the house, giving Toma his privacy. Is Uncle Toma sad? Beth asked, small hand tugging Clara's skirt. Sometimes remembering people we love makes us sad and happy at the same time. Clara explained, it's all right to feel both. That evening, after the children were abed, Clara found herself at the well drawing water for morning. The ranch had settled into its nighttime quiet, distant lowing of cattle, a coyote's call from the hills, the ever-present whisper of wind through cottonwood leaves. You handled that well today. She startled, nearly dropping the bucket. Toma emerged from the shadows, moving with the quiet grace she'd come to associate with him. I didn't mean to overstep. You didn't. He took the full bucket from her, their fingers brushing. The children need to know about their grandmother. It's hard to speak of her. My father never did, after she died. They walked slowly back toward the houses, Toma carrying the water without apparent effort. The moon had risen, painting everything in silver and shadow. How old were you? Clara asked gently. When you lost her, then old enough to remember everything, young enough to think it was somehow my fault. He set the bucket on the porch step. She died of fever. Nothing dramatic, nothing anyone could have prevented. But my father, he turned hard after, as if loving her had been his one softness, and without her, he had to prove he didn't need it. Clara thought of her own parents, how their love had filled that cramped adobe house. Love isn't weakness. No. He turned to face her fully. No, it's not. Took me years to learn that. To understand that the strongest thing she ever did was love us despite everything, the prejudice, the isolation, my father's difficult ways. She chose to love anyway. The intensity in his voice made Clara's heart race. This felt too personal, too intimate for a conversation between employer and employee. She should excuse herself, go inside, maintain proper boundaries. Instead, she heard herself say, "The children are lucky to have you, to have someone who understands that love is a choice we make daily." "Is it?" He stepped closer, not touching but near enough that she could smell leather and horse and the cedar soap he used. "Is love always a choice?" Clara. Her name on his lips sent warmth through her. I should go in early morning." "Of course." He stepped back, breaking the spell. "Good night, Clara." She fled inside on unsteady legs, pressing her back against the closed door. What was she doing? This position, this safety for her siblings, she couldn't risk it for. For what? For the way he looked at her like she was something precious, for conversations that went deeper than any she'd had. Through her window, she could see him still standing by the well, a solitary figure gazing up at the stars. As she watched, he touched his chest, just over his heart, then headed toward the main house. Clara prepared for bed mechanically, her mind churning. She'd been here 2 weeks, and already the boundaries she'd so carefully erected were blurring. But as she lay beside a softly snoring Mary, she found herself thinking not of danger, but of possibility. "I see the woman you are," he'd said at that horrible picnic. Tonight, she was beginning to see the man he was, not just the successful rancher or the responsible guardian, but someone who carried deep wounds with grace, who chose connection despite loss. Tomorrow would bring its usual routine breakfast for hungry children, ledgers to balance, bread to bake, clothes to mend. But tonight, Clara allowed herself to wonder what it might mean to be seen, truly seen, by someone whose own vision had been sharpened by pain into something approaching wisdom. The wind picked up, rattling the windows. From the barn, the new foal's high whinny was answered by her mother's reassuring nicker, life asserting itself. Fragile but determined, wobbling on 2 long legs toward whatever came next. Clara smiled in the darkness. Wobbles. Trust little Beth to name hope exactly what it was, an unsteady, necessary stumble toward standing. Part 4, Dust Storm Night and Words That See. The wind had been wrong all day. Clara felt it in her bones as she secured shutters and checked supplies. The usual steady breeze had turned fitful, gusting from different directions like an animal pacing in a cage. Even the cattle seemed restless, bunching together and lowing uneasily. "Storm coming," Lupe muttered, crossing herself. The bad kind. Clara had lived through dust storms in town, but Josiah warned her they struck differently on the open range. Like the earth itself rises up angry. He'd said, "Best pray you never see a bad one." By late afternoon, the western sky had turned an ominous yellow-brown. Toma rode in with his men, faces grim beneath their bandanas. "Everyone inside," he ordered tersely. "Jose, get the horses secured. Miguel, check the cattle guards. We've got maybe an hour." Clara didn't need to be told twice. She herded the children indoors, setting them to filling water buckets and securing supplies. Mary helped her soak cloths to seal the windows while the boys hauled in extra firewood. "Are we going to be all right?" Beth asked, clutching her doll. "Of course we are," Clara soothed, though her heart hammered. "We just need to be smart and stay together." Toma appeared in the kitchen doorway. "I need to speak with you." He drew her aside, voice low. "I have to go back out. The cattle are spooked if they stampede toward Skeleton Canyon. We'll lose half the herd." In this weather, Clara couldn't keep the alarm from her voice. "Can't be helped." He gripped her shoulders briefly. "Listen, if something happens, if riders come who aren't ours, you bar this door. The rifle's loaded. Above the mantel. You know how to use it." Yes, her father had taught her, back when they'd lived closer to Apache territory. "Good." His hands tightened for a moment. "Keep them safe. Clara, Keep yourself safe." Then he was gone, swallowed by the growing murk. Clara forced herself to move calmly, not wanting to frighten the children. But her mind raced. Why would strange riders come during a storm unless... The first real gust hit like a fist, rattling the heavy shutters. Dust began seeping through every crack despite their preparations. Clara tied bandanas over the children's faces, her own eyes already stinging. "Into the root cellar," she decided. "It'll be safer there." She grabbed the rifle and a lantern, ushering all 6 children down the wooden steps. The cellar was small but sturdy, carved from bedrock and reinforced with thick beams. They huddled together on grain sacks, the little ones in the middle. "Tell us a story, Clara," Sarah requested, voice muffled by her bandana. "Like you do at bedtime." So Clara told them about a princess who lived in a castle made of stars, her voice steady despite the howling wind above. She was just reaching the part where the princess tamed a wild moonbeam when she heard its hoofbeats. Too many and too fast for ranch hands checking cattle. "Shh," she pressed a finger to her lips, reaching for the rifle. "Stay quiet, all of you." The hoofbeats circled the house. Clara heard voices shouting, though the wind tore the words away. Then sharp cracks that weren't thunder. Gunfire. "Down," she hissed, pushing the children flat against the ground. "Mary, keep them down." She crept up the steps, rifle ready. Through a crack in the cellar door, she could see figures moving in the swirling dust. Not ranch hands, their movements were furtive, predatory, cattle thieves, using the storm as cover. More gunshots from the direction of the barn. Clara's mind raced. The house safe held the month's payroll. The barn had the prize breeding stock, but the thieves hadn't counted on the storm being this fierce, or on Toma's men being ready. A figure approached the house, testing the door. Clara raised the rifle, sighting through the crack. Her finger found the trigger. The door shuddered under a heavy blow. Another. The bar held, but it wouldn't forever. Clara made a decision. "Stay here," she whispered to Mary. "No matter what you hear." She slipped from the cellar, moving through the house like a ghost. The front door was holding, but she heard glass breaking in Toma's study. They were coming through the windows. Clara positioned herself in the hallway, rifle steady. A man climbed through, flour sack over his face. She fired, the shot catching his shoulder and spinning him back outside. Another appeared and she fired again, missing but close enough to drive him back. "The house is defended," she shouted, deepening her voice. "We're armed." More shots from outside, but directed elsewhere now. The ranch hands were fighting back, using the storm as cover just as the thieves had tried to. Clara heard Jose's war cry, unmistakable even through the wind. Then, cutting through everything, came Toma's voice roaring orders. The gunfire intensified, but it was moving away from the house now, toward the open range. The thieves were being driven off. Clara stayed at her post until silence fell, broken only by the wind's howl. Even then, she waited. Only when she heard Toma calling her name did she lower the rifle with trembling hands. "Clara, are you hurt?" She unbarred the door. He stood there, dust-caked and wild-eyed, a streak of blood on his cheek from a flying splinter. "We're fine," she managed. "The children are safe." Something broke in his expression. Without warning, he pulled her against him, one hand cupping the back of her head. She felt him trembling, or maybe that was her. "When I heard the shots," he said roughly. "When I thought..." "I'm all right." Her voice came out muffled against his chest. "Toma, I'm all right." He pulled back just enough to see her face, his hands framing it. His eyes held a wildness that had nothing to do with the fight. "Clara," just her name, but weighted with everything he couldn't say. Then, as if drawn by something stronger than propriety or sense, he lowered his head. "May I?" The question came out harsh, desperate. She couldn't speak, could only nod. His mouth found hers, gentle despite the urgency thrumming through him. It was a kiss that asked questions and answered them, that spoke of relief and recognition and something deeper than either. When they broke apart, Clara's knees felt weak. Toma rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "I see the woman you are," he whispered, echoing his words from the picnic, but now they carried new weight. "Brave, steady Clara, guardian of my home, my children. I see you." Tears stung her eyes, mixing with the dust. Before she could respond, small voices erupted from the cellar. "Clara, is it safe?" She stepped back, trying to compose herself. "Yes, loves, you can come up." The children swarmed out, Beth launching herself at Toma's legs while the boys peppered him with questions. Over their heads, his eyes found Clara's again, a promise in them that made her heart race. The storm blew itself out over the next hour, leaving everything coated in fine red dust. The damage was lighter than feared some scattered cattle. A broken window, minor injuries among the men who'd fought off the thieves. Professionals. Miguel reported to Toma as Clara served coffee to the exhausted cowboys. They knew about the payroll, knew the storm would give them cover. Someone's feeding them information. Josiah agreed grimly. This wasn't random. Clara thought of Celia Hart's venomous face, of the rumors that her father owed money to unsavory men, but she kept silent. Suspicion wasn't proof. As the men dispersed to check damage and calm livestock, Toma lingered in the kitchen. The children had been sent to wash, giving them a moment's privacy. "What I said earlier," he began. "What I did. If I overstepped." "You didn't," Clara said quietly. "Though we should. That is, there are the children to consider, and my position. To hell with your position." The vehemence in his voice startled her. "Clara, do you think I care about propriety after tonight you defended this house? You kept our children safe. He stopped, visibly controlling himself. "But you're right. The children come first, always." "Then we take this slow," Clara said, marveling at her own boldness. "Whatever this is, we have time to figure it out." "Time?" He smiled wryly. "Not something I've ever been good at. Patience. Then it's fortunate I have enough for both of us." His laugh was shaky but real. "Fortunate, yes, I'm beginning to believe in fortune again." The days following the storm fell into a new rhythm. The attempted theft had everyone on edge. Riders posted at all hours and weapons kept close. But beneath the watchfulness ran a different current between Clara and Toma awareness that sparked whenever they were in the same room. He found excuses to linger over morning coffee. She found reasons to be on the porch when he returned from riding the range. They spoke of everyday things, the children's lessons, ranch business, the garden finally showing green shoots. But underneath ran deeper conversations conducted in glances and almost touches. "You're humming," Mary observed one evening as Clara kneaded bread. "You never hum." "The children were singing earlier. The tune stuck." But Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Mary studied her shrewdly. "He's a good man." "I don't know what you mean." "Clara," Mary's voice gentled. "I'm 18, not 8. I see how he looks at you, how you look back." Clara's hands stilled in the dough. "It's complicated." "When is it not?" Mary covered Clara's floury hand with her own. "You've spent so long taking care of us. Maybe it's time you let someone take care of you." "I can take care of myself." "I know. That's not the same as being cared for." That night, Clara stood at her window watching the stars. The new foal Ayana was thriving, already racing her shadow across the paddock. The ranch had settled into watchful peace, and somewhere in the big house, Toma was probably standing at his own window, looking at the same stars. She thought of his kiss, of the desperate relief in his voice when he'd found her safe, of the way he'd said her name like a prayer. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. The rustlers were still out there. The town gossips would eventually hear of her position here and draw their own conclusions. The children would need guidance through their grief and growth. But tonight, Clara allowed herself to feel the warmth that bloomed whenever she thought of dark eyes that truly saw her, of strong hands that had trembled as they held her face. "I see the woman you are," he'd said. For the first time in her life, Clara was beginning to see her too, not just as sister and caretaker and worker, but as a woman worthy of being cherished. The realization terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The wind had calmed to its usual whisper through the cottonwoods. In the barn, Ayanna whinnied softly, finding her legs a little stronger each day. And in her small room in the house that was becoming home, Clara Hale finally understood that seeing and being seen were two halves of the same brave act of love. Part V, cattle tracks, and the debt trap. Deputy Marshal Frank Maddox arrived at Three Rivers Ranch 3 days after the storm, his weathered face grave beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Clara watched from the kitchen window as he examined the tracks preserved in a sheltered gully, Toma and Josiah flanking him. "Professional work," Maddox said, crouching to study the hoofprints. "Shoes filed distinct to hide their real marks. But see here," he pointed to a deeper impression. "That's a Tennessee Walker gate, not many of those in the territory." Clara dried her hands and stepped onto the porch, catching the end of their conversation. "Shipment records from the freight office," Maddox was saying. "Interesting thing someone's been asking about your payroll schedules. Discreet-like. But my deputy noticed." "Who?" Toma's voice carried an edge sharp as flint. "That's where it gets complicated." Maddox stood, dusting his hands. "Trail leads to Ephraim Pike's office, the moneylender." Clara's breath caught. Pike held half the town's debts in his grimy ledgers, charging interest that bordered on criminal. She'd heard whispers that he had connections to less savory enterprises, but proof was scarce as rain in drought season. "Morning, Miss Hale." Maddox touched his hat as he noticed her. "Heard you gave those rustlers what for. Fine shooting." "I protected the children," Clara said simply. "With a Spencer rifle and steady aim, from what Jose tells me." The deputy's eyes crinkled with approval. Not many women or men would have held that door. Toma moved closer to her, a protective gesture that didn't escape Maddox's notice. Clara did what needed doing. She always does. The warmth in his voice sent color to her cheeks, but worry gnawed at her. "Deputy Maddox, if Pike is involved..." "Now, I said the trail leads to his office." Maddox corrected carefully. "Could be someone using his place as a message point. Could be coincidence. Without proof." He shrugged. After he left, promising to investigate further, Clara found Toma in his study, staring at a map of the ranch boundaries. "Pike's been after this land for years," he said without looking up. "My father borrowed from him once, paid it back with interest that nearly broke us. Pike never forgave him for escaping his trap. And now he's trying again through different means." "Maybe." Toma traced the water sources marked on the map. "Three rivers make this land valuable beyond the cattle. In dry years, whoever controls water controls everything." Clara moved to stand beside him, studying the map. "The rustlers went for the breeding stock, not the market-ready steers. They wanted to cripple your long-term prospects." He turned to look at her, something soft in his expression. "When did you learn so much about ranching?" "I listen," she said simply. "And I learn fast when something matters." "And this matters?" "This ranch is home to 6 children who deserve stability. Yes, it matters." He reached out, fingers barely grazing her hand where it rested on the desk. "Just the ranch." Before she could answer, hoofbeats announced a visitor. Through the window, Clara saw a familiar figure in yellow taffeta Celia Hart, accompanied by a man Clara didn't recognize. "Stay inside," Toma said quietly. "I'll handle this." But Clara followed him to the porch, unwilling to hide. Celia's companion was sleek as a weasel, with pale eyes that missed nothing and clothes too fine for honest work. "Mr. Nesmith," Celia simpered. I hope you don't mind us calling. This is Mr. Garrett from Kansas City. He's interested in investing in local ranches. Miss Hart, Mr. Garrett. Toma's tone could have frozen water. What brings you to Three Rivers? Garrett smiled, showing too many teeth. Heard you had some trouble during the storm. Terrible thing. Rustlers getting so bold. Makes a man think about selling while his stock's still worth something. My stock is fine. For now. Garrett's gaze slid to Clara. And this must be the famous Miss Hale. Heard about your heroics. Unusual for a housekeeper to be so handy with a rifle. Unusual for rustlers to know about payroll schedules. Clara replied evenly. Garrett's smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold. Desperate men take desperate chances. These are uncertain times. Not for Three Rivers. Toma said, Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do. Celia leaned forward in her saddle. Clara, dear, I do hope you're not getting ideas above your station. Some positions are temporary by nature. Unlike character, Clara responded, which tends to be permanent, for better or worse. Celia flushed ugly red. You'll regret. Miss Hart. Toma stepped forward. You're no longer welcome on Three Rivers land. Mr. Garrett, I suggest you look elsewhere for your investments. They left in a cloud of dust and indignation. Clara found herself trembling with delayed anger. That woman is desperate. Toma finished. Her father owes Pike more than he can pay. She thought marrying well would save them, but her reputation... He shook his head. Desperation makes people dangerous. That evening, Clara couldn't settle to her usual tasks. She found herself in the garden, yanking weeds with unnecessary force. The children were in bed, Mary reading to them, and the ranch had settled into its nighttime quiet. You'll pull up the beans along with the weeds at that rate. She looked up to find Toma watching from the gate. He'd shed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, looking more approachable than the stern rancher who'd faced down Celia. I keep thinking about what she said, about positions being temporary. He entered the garden, crouching beside her. Clara, look at me! She did, finding his face serious in the twilight. Your position here is as permanent as you want it to be. The children need you. The ranch needs you. His voice dropped. I need you? Toma! I know we agreed to take things slow, and we will, but I won't have you doubting your place here because of poisonous words from people who don't matter. She managed a shaky laugh. You're not very good at slow. No, he agreed, standing and offering her his hand. But I'm very good at certain. She let him pull her to her feet, his hand warm and calloused around hers. For a moment they stood there, the evening air soft around them, the scent of sage and turned earth rising from the garden. The children are starting to heal, she said softly. Beth laughed today, really laughed, and James asked if he could call me Aunt Clara, like Beth does. What did you say? Yes, of course. Is that... Are you comfortable with that? His thumb brushed across her knuckles. My brother would have loved you. Would have seen what I see, someone who makes a house a home just by being in it. Toma. I'm being patient, he said, but his eyes said otherwise. Just let me say these things sometimes. Let me tell you what I see. She squeezed his hand. As long as you let me do the same. And what do you see? Clara Hale. She studied his face, the lines carved by sun and responsibility. The gentleness he tried so hard to hide, the strength that ran bone deep. I see a man who carries too much alone, she said finally. Who gives and protects and provides but forgets he's allowed to receive too. I see someone who deserves. She stopped, suddenly shy. What? His voice had gone rough. What do I deserve? Everything, she whispered. A home full of laughter. Children who feel safe to be children. Someone who... Clara, Clara! Dan's voice shattered the moment. He came running from the house. Robbie's crying and won't stop, and Mary can't calm him down. Clara sighed. Duty calling. But Toma didn't release her hand immediately. We'll finish this conversation, he promised. She nodded and hurried after Dan, but she felt Toma's gaze follow her all the way to the house. Inside, she found Robbie curled in Mary's lap, sobbing with the abandon of a 7-year-old whose world had tilted wrong. What happened? Sweet boy. Clara knelt beside them. But Billy Morrison said we're charity cases. Robbie hiccuped. Said we're living on handouts, and Mr. Toma will throw us out when he gets tired of you. Clara's heart clenched. She gathered Robbie into her arms, looking over his head at Mary's stricken face. Listen to me, she said firmly. We work for our place here. I cook and clean and manage the household. Mary helps with the children and the mending. You and Dan do chores every day. That's not charity, that's earning our way with honest work. But Billy said, Billy Morrison is 8 years old and repeating gossip he doesn't understand. She smoothed Robbie's hair. Mr. Toma hired me because he needed help. We're employees, not beggars, and good employees are valuable. Really? Really. Now, how about I warm some milk with honey that always helps tears dry up? Later, after Robbie had been soothed and tucked back into bed, Clara found Mary on the porch, arms wrapped around her knees. It's not going away, is it? Mary asked. The talk, the judgment. Clara sat beside her sister. No, probably not. But it's different here. Better. Yes. Mary was quiet for a moment. He loves you, you know, Mr. Toma, the way he looks at you. Mary, I'm glad, her sister continued. You deserve someone who sees your worth, who doesn't care what small-minded people say. Clara pulled Mary close. When did you get so wise? Had a good teacher. They sat together watching the stars wheel overhead, finding comfort in the vast silence of the range. In town, night meant closed doors and whispered gossip. Here, it meant possibility as wide as the sky. The next morning brought a letter that changed everything. Josiah delivered it with Toma's other mail, his expression troubled. From the bank, he said unnecessarily. The return address was clear. Toma read it at the breakfast table, his face darkening with each line. Without a word, he handed it to Clara. The bank was calling in a loan one Toma's father had co-signed for a neighbor years ago. The neighbor had died, his land forfeit, and now the bank wanted immediate payment of the full amount. $3,000? Clara breathed. Due in 30 days. Pike bought the note. Toma said grimly, This has his stench all over it. Can we pay it? Not without selling cattle at a loss. Or, he stopped. Or borrowing from Pike himself, which is what he wants to get his hooks into Three Rivers any way he can. Clara's mind raced. What about the army contracts? They're always needing beef. Takes time to arrange, more than 30 days. Then we make time. She stood, breakfast forgotten. Josiah, who do we know at Fort Buchanan, Mary? We'll need to inventory every head of stock, every asset. Toma. She stopped, realizing both men were staring at her. What did them? A slow smile spread across Toma's face. And here I thought I was the one who gave orders around here. Heat flooded her cheeks. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... No. He stood, moving closer. Don't apologize. This is what I need, someone who fights beside me, not behind me. He looked at Josiah. You heard the lady. Let's get to work. As the men dispersed to their tasks, Clara caught Toma's arm. We won't let him win. Pike, I mean... No, he agreed, covering her hand with his. We won't. The word we hung between them, weighted with promise. Whatever came next, they would face it together, a notion that should have frightened Clara, but instead filled her with fierce determination. Ephraim Pike thought he could destroy what they were building here. He was about to learn that some things home, family, love taking root were stronger than any trap he could set. Part 6, Salt Valley. The full moon hung like a silver dollar over Salt Valley, casting stark shadows across the alkali flats. Clara crouched behind a cluster of greasewood, her rifle steady across her knees, watching the signal fire Toma had predicted would appear behind her. Mary held the horses with Dan and James, while Lupe kept the younger children safe at the ranch. "There," Josiah whispered, pointing to a flicker of light near the old mine shaft. "Just like the boss figured." Toma had been right. The rustlers were using the abandoned salt works as their gathering point. For 2 weeks, he'd played a careful game, letting word spread that Three Rivers would move its prize breeding stock to fresh pasture on the full moon. Bait for a trap. "Remember," Clara murmured to her group, "we hold this position no matter what. The signal goes up only if they break through toward the ranch." Young Miguel nodded, clutching the torch that would light their warning fire. Around them, hidden in arroyos and behind rocks, Toma's men waited. The trap was set. Movement below. Riders emerging from the shadows. Too many to count in the tricky light. Clara recognized the sleek form of Garrett among them, his city clothes traded for rough gear that didn't quite fit. No sign of Pike, he was too clever to dirty his own hands. The rustlers moved toward the box canyon where the prize stock waited in reality. 30 head of culls, enough to tempt but not devastate if lost. Toma's real breeding stock grazed safely in a hidden valley Jose's Apache relatives had shown them. "Now," Clara breathed, watching the rustlers enter the canyon. The night erupted. Toma's men rose from concealment, rifles creating a deadly crossfire. The rustlers, caught between canyon walls and armed cowboys, milled in confusion. Some tried to flee back the way they'd come, only to find that exit blocked. Others spurred toward the narrow defile at the canyon's far end. "Clara!" Mary's sharp cry spun her around. 3 riders had broken away before the trap closed, heading not for escape, but toward Three Rivers Ranch. "Light it," Clara ordered Miguel. The boy touched torch to prepared kindling, sending flames leaping skyward, the signal for the ranch guards to prepare. But Clara wasn't content to wait. "Mary, take the children back. Now." "Clara, no." "Go." She was already mounting her horse, rifle in hand. "They're after more than cattle. The house safe. The children go." She spurred after the fleeing riders, hearing hoofbeats behind her Dan, stubborn as his sister, refusing to be left behind. No time to send him back. The riders were faster, better mounted. But Clara knew this land now, every wash and gully. She cut across Salt Creek Wash, gaining ground, coming up on their flank as they neared the ranch buildings. One rider peeled off, heading for the main house. Clara's blood went cold. The children. She fired, missed, fired again. The rider's horse screamed and stumbled, sending him rolling in the dust. But the other 2 were already at the house, one heading for the office where the safe stood. The other. "The barn," Dan shouted. "He's going for the barn," where they stored not just hay, but the winter's grain supply. One torch there would destroy months of provisions. Clara made her choice. "Stop him," she told Dan, wheeling toward the house. Her brother, 13 and fearless, whooped and charged toward the barn. The office window shattered as Clara reached the porch. Through the broken glass, she could see a figure bent over the safe, working at the lock. She raised her rifle, but movement to her left made her spin the rider she'd unhorsed, bloodied but standing, reaching for his gun. Time slowed, his weapon clearing leather, her rifle swinging around, the certain knowledge that she wouldn't be fast enough. Then thunder split the night, and the man spun away. Clutching his shoulder, Toma stood at the corner of the house, smoking pistol in hand, his face terrible in the moonlight. "The safe," Clara began. "Let him try. I changed the combination." He moved past her, swift and deadly, Where are the children? Mary took them to the root cellar. Dan went after the one heading for the barn. Toma cursed. Through the office window, they could see the would-be thief abandon the safe, diving out the far window as Toma fired again. From the barn came shouts. Then a shot. Clara's heart stopped until she heard Dan's voice, high with excitement. Got him well! Winged him anyway! He's running! The ranch came alive with armed cowboys converging from all directions. Within minutes, they had 2 prisoners, the wounded men, while the third had vanished into the darkness. Let him go, Toma said when Jose would have pursued. He'll run straight to whoever hired him. Maddox can follow that trail. Deputy Maddox arrived with the dawn, bringing the rustlers captured in Salt Valley. Among them was Garrett, his fine clothes torn and dusty, his weasel face sullen. Well, well, Maddox said, surveying the prisoners. Mr. Garrett, seems your investment strategies have taken an interesting turn. I demand a lawyer, Garrett snarled. This is entrapment, harassment. I'll have your badge. You'll have a fair trial, Maddox cut him off. After you explain why you were leading rustlers onto private property. He turned to one of the captured men, a grizzled cowboy with defeated eyes. Unless someone else wants to explain first, sometimes judges look kindly on cooperation. The grizzled man spat tobacco juice. Weren't supposed to go like this. Quick raid, good pay. Nobody hurt. That's what he said. He jerked his head at Garrett. He, Maddox prompted. He who? But Garrett had recovered his composure. I don't know this man. I was merely riding through. Got caught up in... Save it. Maddox sighed. Though I'd wager when we search your belongings, we'll find something interesting. Maps, maybe. Payment receipts. You strike me as the type who keeps records. Garrett went pale. As Maddox's deputies led the prisoners away, the deputy lingered, speaking quietly to Toma and Clara. This isn't over, he warned. Garrett's small fish. Whoever's behind this pike or someone else, they'll try again. Let them, Toma said grimly. We'll be ready. After Maddox left, Clara found herself alone with Toma on the porch. The morning sun painted the ranch buildings gold, peaceful after the night's violence. Dan could have been killed, she said quietly. I should never have let him. You couldn't have stopped him. Toma's hand found hers. That boy has your courage, your stubbornness too. I was terrified, she admitted, when I saw them heading for the house. All I could think about was the children. But you acted anyway. That's what courage is. Clara, not the absence of fear, but action despite it. She turned to face him fully. When you came around that corner, when you saved me. Don't. His voice was rough. Don't thank me for protecting what's mine. The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed her. Instead, it sent warmth flooding through her. Yours, she challenged softly. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Mine, he confirmed. If you'll have me, my partner, my equal, my... Clara, Beth's voice preceded her by seconds. The little girl burst onto the porch, pigtails flying. Dan says he's a hero now, says he gets extra pie. Clara laughed shakily, stepping back from Toma. Dan says a lot of things. Heroes still have to do their chores. But he saved the barn. And I'm proud of him. But... Extra pie seems fair. Toma interrupted, eyes twinkling. For all the heroes, including the lady who led a midnight charge. Beth's eyes went round. You're a hero too. Can I be a hero? When you're older, Clara promised, swinging the little girl up into her arms. For now, heroes need breakfast. The morning dissolved into ordinary chaos children to feed, chores to assign, a ranch to run. But underneath the routine ran a new current. The cowboys treated Clara with added respect, touching their hats and calling her ma'am with real deference. The children buzzed with excitement. retelling the night's adventures with increasing embellishment. And Toma watched her with eyes that promised conversations unfinished, declarations unmade. It was late afternoon when unexpected visitors arrived. Clara was in the garden, showing Sarah how to stake tomatoes, when a carriage rolled into the yard. Not just any carriage, Mayor Hart's fancy imported Surrey with matching grays. Celia Hart descended, but she looked different. Gone was the haughty beauty who'd humiliated Clara at the church picnic. This woman was pale, drawn, her yellow dress hanging loose on her frame. "Miss Hale," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Might I speak with you?" Clara straightened slowly. Sarah pressed against her side. Every instinct screamed warning. But something in Celia's defeated posture gave her pause. "Sarah, go find your uncle," Clara said quietly. "Tell him we have visitors." When they were alone, Celia swayed on her feet. Clara, despite everything, reached out to steady her. "Please," Celia whispered. "I need to tell someone, before it's too late." "Tell someone what?" "About Pike, about what he made me do." Tears tracked down her pale cheeks. "I thought if I helped him get 3 Rivers, he'd forgive Father's debts. Let us keep our house, our position. But he lied. He always lies." Clara's mind raced. "You helped plan the rustling." "The first attempt, I told them about the payroll, the routines. But I swear I didn't know about last night. When I heard—" She grabbed Clara's hands with desperate strength. "Children could have been hurt. Your children. I may be many things, but I'm not a monster." "What do you want from me?" "Protection. Witness. I'll tell Deputy Maddox everything Pike's plans, his connections, where he keeps his real ledgers. But I need somewhere safe. He'll kill me if he knows I've turned." Clara looked into the eyes of the woman who'd tormented her. Seeing not an enemy, but another of Pike's victims, she made her decision. "Toma," she called. "We need Deputy Maddox. Now." What followed was a whirlwind. Celia, under Maddox's protection, revealed everything. Pike's network of debt and intimidation, his connections to rustling gangs across the territory, the location of duplicate ledgers that showed his true business not just moneylending, but theft, extortion, even murder. "He had my father's partner killed," Celia said dully. Made it look like Apache raiders. Father knew but was too afraid to speak. That's how Pike trapped us with blood as well as debt. By nightfall, Maddox had enough for warrants. By midnight, Pike was in custody, caught trying to flee with saddlebags full of gold and incriminating documents. "Your testimony will be needed," Maddox told Clara and Toma. "But I think we've got him, thanks to Miss Hart's courage." After he left with Celia bound for protective custody in Tucson, Clara found herself standing where this had all begun, by the well that had witnessed so many pivotal moments. "She was brave," Clara said softly. "At the end." "Yes." Toma stood beside her, close but not touching. "People can surprise you. Like when a poor laundress stands up to rustlers. Like when a man who thought his heart was buried with his family finds it beating again." Clara turned to him, breath catching at the emotion in his eyes. "The children need stability," she said weakly. We agreed. "The children need parents," he corrected. "A mother and father who love them and each other. Clara, I'm done being patient. I'm done pretending that you're just my housekeeper, that what I feel is mere gratitude or attraction. I love you. I see the woman you are, and I love every stubborn, brave, beautiful part of you. Toma, marry me." The words hung in the night air like stars. Not because it's proper or practical, but because I can't imagine another day without the right to call you mine. Because you've already made this house a home, and I want to make it official. Because— "Yes," Clara interrupted, laughing through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Yes, you impossible man. Yes to all of it." He caught her to him then, kissing her with all the pent-up longing of their careful courtship. When they broke apart, both breathing hard. He rested his forehead against hers. "I see the woman you are," he whispered, their private litany. "And she's going to be my wife." "I see the man you are," she replied, "and I choose him, today and always." From the house came the sound of children's voices raised in argument over some game. "They're children," Clara realized. "They're family. We should tell them," she said. In a moment, Toma pulled her close again. "Let me hold you first, my brave Clara, who faced down rustlers and the town's scorn and my own stubborn heart." She nestled into his embrace, feeling the solid strength of him, the promise of partnership and passion, and a lifetime of moments like this. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The trial, the ranch work, the ongoing task of healing and building, but tonight, under the vast Arizona sky, Clara Hale, soon to be Clara Nesmith, stood in the arms of the man who truly saw her and knew herself home at last. Part 7. Justice and Words in the Town Square. The makeshift courtroom in Sage Creek's town hall overflowed with curious citizens, the air thick with august heat and anticipation. Clara sat in the front row, her hands folded calmly despite the whispers that followed her entrance. Beside her, Toma remained steady as granite, his presence a silent challenge to anyone who might question her right to be there. "All rise for Judge Samuel Hawthorne," the bailiff called. Judge Hawthorne, circuit judge for the territory, was known for his fairness and intolerance of corruption. His sharp eyes surveyed the packed room before settling on the defendant's table where Ephraim Pike sat, no longer the imposing figure who'd held half the town in his debt. "This preliminary hearing," Judge Hawthorne began, "will determine if sufficient evidence exists to bind Mr. Ephraim Pike over for trial on charges of conspiracy, extortion, cattle theft, and murder." The word murder sent a ripple through the crowd. Clara noticed Mayor Hart in a back corner, his face aged 10 years in recent weeks. Deputy Marshal Maddox took the stand first, laying out the evidence with methodical precision. The ledgers Celia had revealed, the testimonies of captured rustlers, the paper trail connecting Pike to years of systematic crime. The defendant maintained 2 sets of books, Maddox explained, showing the court the damning documents. One for public consumption, another recording his true business lending at rates exceeding 60%, then orchestrating thefts and accidents when debtors couldn't pay. When Celia Hart was called, the courtroom held its breath. She entered wearing a simple gray dress, her former vanity stripped away. Her voice, once used for cutting remarks, now carried quiet determination. "I participated in Ephraim Pike's schemes," she said clearly, "not by choice, but because he held my father's life in his hands. He told me if I didn't help him acquire Three Rivers Ranch, he'd call in father's debts and reveal father's knowledge of Samuel Morrison's murder." Gasps echoed through the hall. Morrison had been Mayor Hart's business partner, killed 5 years ago in what everyone believed was an Apache raid. "Pike arranged it," Celia continued, tears streaming down her face. "Made it look like Indians. Father suspected but was too frightened to speak. That's how Pike controlled us, through fear and shame." "Objection!" Pike's lawyer shouted. "Hearsay and speculation." "This is a preliminary hearing, not a trial," Judge Hawthorne reminded him. "Continue, Miss Hart." Celia detailed Pike's plans for Three Rivers, how he'd orchestrated the rustling attempts, planning to force Toma into bankruptcy and steal the water-rich land. He said the Nesmith Ranch was key to controlling the whole valley's water supply. With it, he could charge whatever he wanted, force out anyone who opposed him. When Clara was called to testify, she rose on steady legs despite the weight of all those watching eyes. She'd faced down worse than public scrutiny. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor instructed. "Clara Hale, housekeeper and manager at Three Rivers Ranch." "Miss Hale, please describe the events of August 15th. Clara recounted the night of the dust storm, the attack, the defense of the house, The professional nature of the rustlers. Her voice remained calm, factual, but those who knew her could hear the steel underneath. The attackers knew exactly when to strike, she said. They had information only someone with inside knowledge could provide. And the second attempt was a trap. She allowed herself a small smile. Mr. Nesmith suspected they'd try again. We were ready. You participated in defending the ranch both times. I protected my home and the children in my care. Any woman would do the same. Not any woman could do what you did, the prosecutor said warmly. No further questions. Pike's lawyer stood, his smile sharp as a blade. Miss Hale, isn't it true you've risen quite remarkably in station since taking employment at Three Rivers? I work for my wages, sir. Yet you presume to give orders to cowboys, manage household accounts, make decisions typically reserved for, well, for someone of higher standing. Clara's chin lifted. I do the job I was hired to do. And that job includes capturing dangerous criminals riding midnight charges activities rather beyond a simple housekeeper's duties. When those criminals threaten children, yes, her voice carried clearly. I'd face down the devil himself to protect those in my care. Social standing has nothing to do with courage or capability. So you admit to overstepping your position. I admit to doing what was necessary and right. If that troubles you, perhaps you should examine why. Snickers rippled through the crowd. The lawyer flushed. You seem very comfortable with violence for a woman of your background. I'm comfortable with justice, Clara corrected, and uncomfortable with men who prey on the vulnerable. Whatever my background, sir, it taught me to recognize the difference between strength and cruelty. Mr. Pike represents the latter. When Toma took the stand, his testimony was brief but damning. He presented the fraudulent loan documents, the attempts to steal his land, the systematic targeting of Three Rivers. Pike wanted more than money, he stated. He wanted control over water, land, lives. He's not a businessman, he's a predator. The hearing stretched through the day. Witness after witness painted a picture of Pike's web of crime. Cowboys testified to rustling raids. Townspeople revealed debts that multiplied impossibly. The banker, granted immunity, admitted to falsifying documents under Pike's threats. Finally, Judge Hawthorne had heard enough. Ephraim Pike, he pronounced, you will be bound over for trial on all charges. Given the serious nature of these crimes and your apparent means to flee, bail is denied. Pike lunged to his feet. You can't do this. I own this town. I made these people. No, Mr. Pike, the judge said coldly. You fed on them. Take him away. As deputies dragged Pike out, his eyes found Clara. The venom there made her shiver, but Toma's hand found hers, warm and steady. Outside the courthouse, the crowd parted before them. Some faces showed respect, others uncertainty. The social order they'd known had shifted, and change came hard to small towns. Miss Hale, Reverend Abel approached, his wife beside him. I owe you an apology. We all do. You showed Christian courage while we showed only judgment. Anyone can mistake appearance for truth, Clara said quietly. It takes strength to admit error. Mrs. Chen stepped forward next, followed by others. The blacksmith's wife, the schoolteacher, even Mrs. Palmer from the general store. Though she looked as if the words pained her, we were wrong. Mrs. Chen said simply, you've protected this town's children, helped expose a criminal, shown us what real dignity looks like. We're sorry. Clara felt tears threaten, but held them back. I don't need apologies. Just see people for who they are, not what they have. That's all any of us want. Wise words. Mayor Hart had approached, looking haggard but resolute. Miss Hale, Mr. Nesmith, I need to thank you, and to apologize for my daughter's part in Celia showed courage when it mattered. Clara interrupted. That's what we should remember. Hart's eyes filled. You're a remarkable woman, Miss Hale. This town is lucky to have you. As the crowd dispersed, Toma drew Clara aside. How do you do that forgive so easily? It's not forgiveness, she said thoughtfully. It's practicality. We'll live alongside these people for years to come. Better to build bridges than walls. My practical, Clara. His voice held wonder. Though I notice you're still Miss Hale to them. Heat crept up her neck. Well, we haven't exactly announced. Haven't we? Before she could protest, he raised his voice. Friends, neighbors, while we're all here, I have an announcement. The dispersing crowd turned back, curious. Clara Hale has done me the honor of agreeing to become my wife. Toma declared. The woman who defended my home, who mothers my brother's children, who makes every day brighter just by being in it, she's agreed to marry me. Shocked silence greeted this pronouncement. Then Mary's delighted squeal broke the spell. She flew at Clara, laughing and crying at once, the other children close behind. A wedding, Beth crowed. Can I carry flowers? We'll all carry flowers, Sarah said, her usual solemnity cracking into a smile. Through the chaos of congratulations, some heartfelt, others dutiful Clara caught Toma's eye. He looked entirely too pleased with himself. You couldn't have waited, she murmured when they had a moment. Waited for what? For them to accept us, we'd be waiting forever. He pulled her closer. Propriety be damned. I'm done hiding what you mean to me. Let them talk. Let them see that the best woman in the territory chose a half-breed rancher. And he's the luckiest man alive for it. Toma. No more shadows. Clara, no more careful distances. You stood in that courtroom and claimed your place. Let me claim mine as your future husband, before God and everybody. She looked around at the faces, watching them, some approving, some skeptical, all reassessing. Then she looked at the children clustered around them, faces bright with joy. At Mary, finally seeing her sister choose happiness. At the cowboys from Three Rivers, grinning and already planning shivery mischief. All right, she said loud enough for all to hear. Yes, I'm marrying Toma Nesmith. Yes, I'll continue managing his household. Yes, I'll defend our home against any who threaten it. And yes, she looked directly at the most disapproving faces. I'll do it all with pride, because I've learned something these past months. Worth isn't measured in money or status. It's measured in courage, in kindness, in the willingness to stand for what's right. And in the ability to make a perfect pie, Dan added, earning laughs. That too, Clara agreed, ruffling his hair. As they walked back to the ranch, their ranch, Clara marveled at how much had changed. The woman who'd scrubbed floors in shame now walked tall beside the man she loved, children dancing around them, future bright despite all obstacles. Any regrets? Toma asked softly. Only one, she admitted. I wish my parents could see this, could know their daughter found a good man, a home, a place to belong. They know, he said with quiet certainty. How could they not? Their daughter blazes like a star. That night, after the children were abed and the ranch had settled into peace, Clara stood on the porch watching the stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The trial would be difficult. Building their life together would take work, teaching the children, running the ranch, navigating a world that didn't quite know what to make of them. None of it would be easy. But tonight, she was content. She'd found her place, her purpose, her person, and in finding them, she'd found herself not the poor laundress of Sage Creek's scorn, but Clara Hale, defender of homes, protector of children, soon to be Clara Nesmith. I see the woman you are, Toma had said at that long-ago church picnic. Finally, Clara thought, she saw her too, and she liked what she saw. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, answered by another voice in harmony. The sound echoed across the valley. Wild and free and perfectly paired, a song of belonging that needed no translation, no approval, no validation, but its own truth. Clara smiled and went inside to the man who saw her truly, to the children who needed her, to the life they were building together. Tomorrow could bring what it would. Tonight, she was home, Part 7, Nate. The season of planting. Spring came early to Three Rivers Ranch that year, painting the desert with a riot of wildflowers that seemed to celebrate the new life taking root everywhere. Clara stood in her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of cream muslin that Mary and Lupe had sewn with loving hands, watching the sunrise from her window one last time as Clara Hale. "You're up early," Mary said softly, entering with a cup of tea. "Nervous?" "No." Clara realized with some surprise. "No, I'm not nervous at all. This feels right, like everything has led to this moment." Mary's eyes misted. Mama would be so proud. Papa too. Their little Clara, mistress of a great ranch, marrying for love. "Not mistress," Clara corrected gently. "Partner. That's what Toma and I will be, partners in everything." The wedding was held beneath the great cottonwood that shaded the ranch house, its new leaves whispering blessings. Half the territory had come, some out of genuine affection, others from curiosity. Clara didn't mind either way. Let them see that love could bloom between unlikely souls, that worth wasn't measured in bloodlines or bank accounts. Reverend Abel performed the ceremony, his words carrying new sincerity since Pike's trial had opened everyone's eyes. "Marriage," he intoned, "is not merely a joining of two lives, but a creation of something entirely new, a home, a haven, a harmony." Toma stood waiting for her in his finest suit, but it was his eyes that caught her, dark and deep and full of promises. Beside him, Dan tried to stand still in his role as groomsman, while James kept tugging at his collar. The girls, all three of them, scattered flower petals with solemn concentration. "Who gives this woman to be married?" Reverend Abel asked. "She gives herself," Mary announced clearly, "with the blessing of her family." It was unconventional, but then nothing about their story had followed convention. Clara walked forward alone, head high, choosing her path as she always had, with courage and clear sight. "Clara," Toma said when she reached him, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "I see the woman you are, and I promise to keep seeing her every day for the rest of our lives." "I see the man you are," she whispered back, "and I choose you, today and always." The vows they exchanged were simple but heartfelt. No flowery promises they couldn't keep, just truth to stand together, to build together, to face whatever came with joined hands and united purpose. When Reverend Abel pronounced them husband and wife, when Toma kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak, the cheer that went up could be heard clear to Salt Valley. Cowboys tossed their hats, children shrieked with delight, and even the stuffiest townswomen dabbed at their eyes. The celebration that followed filled the ranch with music and laughter. Jose's guitar, Miguel's fiddle, and harmonicas from half the cowboys created a joyful noise. Tables groaned under the weight of food, not fancy fare, but honest ranch cooking that filled bellies and hearts alike. "Mrs. Nesmith," Celia Hart approached during a quiet moment, still thin from her ordeal but with new steel in her spine. "I wanted to thank you again for your forgiveness, for showing me that strength doesn't come from standing above others, but from lifting them up. We all learn in our own time." Clara said gently, "What matters is what we do with the knowledge." Celia nodded, then surprised them both by adding, "I'm leaving for San Francisco next week. My aunt runs a school there. I'm going to learn to teach, to do something useful with my life. Maybe I can help other girls avoid the mistakes I made." "That's wonderful," Clara said, meaning it. The best apology is always a changed life. As afternoon mellowed into evening, Toma found Clara watching the children play, all 6 of them now truly siblings. racing through the garden she'd coaxed from desert soil. "Happy?" he asked, arms encircling her from behind. "Look at them," she said softly. 6 months ago, they were grieving, lost. Now they have a mother who'd face down rustlers for them, a father who'll always provide, and each other." He turned her in his arms. "We did that, Clara. We made them a family." "We made us a family," she corrected. Deputy Marshal Maddox approached, dust covered from the trail. "Sorry to interrupt the festivities, but thought you'd want to know." Pike was convicted on all counts. Life in territorial prison, no possibility of parole. "It's over then," Clara breathed. "That chapter? Yes," Maddox smiled. "But something tells me you folks are just getting started." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Toma stood to address their guests. "Friends, neighbors, family," he began. "Thank you for sharing this day with us. 6 months ago, I was a man with a ranch but not a home. My brother's children were orphans in all but name. Then Clara Hale walked into our lives and changed everything." He looked down at her, love clear in his eyes. "She brought order to chaos, warmth to coldness, hope to despair. But more than that, she showed all of us what it means to see people truly, not their circumstances, not their bloodlines, not their past mistakes, but who they are at their core. Today, we're announcing another new beginning." Clara stood beside him, their hands linked. "We'll be opening a school here at 3 Rivers, free to any child who wants to learn, and alongside it, a workshop where women can learn skills sewing, accounting, anything that might help them stand on their own feet. Education and opportunity." Toma added, "The 2 things that can break any chain, bridge any divide." The response was mixed enthusiasm from some, skepticism from others, but Clara saw Mary's glowing face, saw the hope in the eyes of the Mexican mothers, saw cowboys who couldn't read exchange glances of possibility. "Change is hard," she said into the moment. "But staying the same when the world needs better, that's harder. We're choosing the difficult path, and we invite anyone with courage to walk it with us." Later, much later, after the guests had gone and the children were abed, Clara and Toma sat on their porch watching the stars. The same stars that had witnessed her shame at the church picnic now blessed her triumph. "No regrets?" Toma asked, echoing his question from the day of the trial. "How could I regret the path that led me here?" Clara leaned into his warmth. "Every hardship, every humiliation, every moment I wanted to give up, but didn't, they all brought me to you, to this life, to who I was meant to be." "Mrs. Clara Nesmith," he said, savoring the words. "Teacher, protector, partner, wife, the woman I see and will keep seeing until my eyes close for the last time. And probably after." She teased, "I'm too stubborn to let a little thing like death stop me from keeping you in line." His laugh rumbled through the night, in the barn. Ayana the foal named for Toma's mother whickered softly. She was growing strong and swift, a symbol of new life honoring the old. "The children want to know if there will be babies," Clara said suddenly. "Beth asked if we could grow them in the garden like squash." "And what did you tell her?" "That babies come when they're meant to, and meanwhile, 6 children are quite enough to keep us busy, but not too busy for 1 or 2 more." Hope colored his voice. Clara smiled. "We'll see what the seasons bring. After all, this is planting time." As if in agreement, a cool breeze swept across the ranch, carrying the scent of sage and new growth. Somewhere in the darkness, a mockingbird began its night song, borrowed melodies made unique by the singer's own voice. "That's us," Toma murmured, taking the broken pieces others left behind and making something new. Clara thought of her mother's mended shawl, now carefully folded in their bedroom. Each patch and darn had strengthened it, made it uniquely beautiful. Like their family, like their love, like the life they were building stitch by patient stitch. "I love you," she said simply, "for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for giving me a place to stand tall, for being the kind of man who builds instead of tears down." "I love you," he replied, "for showing me that strength and gentleness can live in the same heart, for turning my house into a home, for being exactly who you are, no more, no less, but absolutely everything." They sat in comfortable silence as the ranch settled for the night. Tomorrow would bring the first day of their married life, with all its ordinary miracles. There would be breakfast to make, children to guide, a school to build, a community to slowly transform. There would be challenges, drought and storm, prejudice and resistance, the simple difficulties of blending lives and dreams. But tonight, Clara Nesmith sat with her husband on the porch of their home, surrounded by the family they'd chosen and created, looking out over land that would nurture generations to come. The woman who'd once been shamed for her poverty now held riches beyond measure, not in gold or goods, but in the golden light of belonging, the treasure of being truly seen and deeply loved. "I see the woman you are," Toma had said that day at the church picnic, lifting her from the dust of humiliation. And now, seasons later, Clara knew the truth of it. He had seen her not as she was then, scared and shamed and struggling, but as she could be, would be, had become. His vision had called her forward into herself, into her strength, into the fullness of a life lived with courage and compassion. And she had seen him too, the man beneath the stern rancher facade, the heart that beat for justice and family, and the wild hope of love despite loss. Together, they would teach their children to see truly, to look past surface into soul, to know that every person carried within them the seed of who they might become, waiting only for the right conditions to bloom. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and patient. The desert breathed its ancient rhythms, and, on Three Rivers Ranch, two people who had found each other across all the world's divisions held tight to their shared truth. Love sees truly. Love chooses daily. Love plants seeds in unlikely ground and tends them through every season until the harvest comes home at last. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this tale meant to you. If you enjoyed this journey through the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help more people discover these stories of love, courage, and redemption in the American frontier.